I think it's a major stupidity, although I guess it's a democratic decision, but normally you can assume that democratic decisions are somehow based on being informed properly. And I find the most bizarre thing that if you look at the way Britain voted, that it's actually those people who stood to gain most from the European Union were the first to vote against. And this is just a mesmerizing, strangely hypnotic, surreal experience. And I think, and I also wrote it at some point, when the challenges get bigger, basically national sovereignty is a myth. I think it's long been a myth. Politics is all about managing interdependence between countries in a global economy. So if you decide to leave the EU, that just leaves one less framework to manage it. I mean, I think the larger the problems, the larger the arena in which they need to be addressed. That was also the gist of my presentation. And in Europe you have essentially two types of countries. You have countries that know they are small, and you have countries that don't know they are small. And somehow Britain, by doing this, has firmly put itself in the last category.
Well, the EU flag that OMA designed many years ago was foreseeing this flexibility on adding more countries.
Yeah, we can
I
also
don't know if you
subtract.
thought.
Yeah, we can also subtract one. Yeah, although the unfortunate thing is that Britain isn't at either end, so it does leave a kind of rather uncomfortable white gap if you were to do it literally. But I guess you would have to move it back in. No, in our flag you can't tell the difference, but in the current EU flag you also cannot tell the difference. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. I think there will be a palpable difference somehow, and I just don't think it's going to be for the better.
But well, in this city, you have worked from the very broad scale of the master plan for its growth into singular buildings.
Yeah.
What do you think that are the challenges of Moscow City?
Well, I mean, I think the challenges are on either end. You're right. I mean, we worked on a very, very big plan for the expansion of the city, and we worked on small projects. And by the way, the small projects are realized, and the big vision, well, I sort of think it's being realized, which is not part of the realization, but I think some of the ideas transpired. That's interesting, coming back after 3 years, is that bit by bit you do see that ideas that were launched in the context of that competition, not just by us, but there were 10 large consortia, that ideas like that are being picked up and are slowly but surely being implemented. But I think the challenge for the city, and it's actually, I'm not sure whether it's a challenge. What Moscow does well, I feel, is that it does a great number of things at the same time. It has, with this My Street project, for instance, it's an overhaul of the utility infrastructure on the one hand, but it's also a kind of acupuncture where fun is inserted in the city in a kind of frivolous manner. So it's an interesting mix between kind of frivolous fun and a serious redesign of the city's infrastructure. And I find that, in a way, I mean, I now see it for the first time. I find that impressive because, I mean, in a lot of other cities, interventions about public space are very cosmetic, or they stop at the rhetoric. And here there is somehow an interesting degree of follow-up on the rhetoric. I think when we worked on the big Moscow project, it was truly intellectually a very, very stimulating experience. It's not often that you get asked questions to think about things really on that scale. So that was very, very nice, and we did. And there were also no limits as to the amount of things we could think about, the amount of things we could consider, the overhauls we could consider. So in terms of a thinking exercise, that was wonderful. In terms of getting anything implemented, I mean, you then find that Moscow and Russia is similar to anywhere else. You know, that practice is long, hard, and difficult to get from the conception to the reality in a place. So, but I guess those difficulties in that sense, which is in a way comparable to other countries and therefore perhaps modern.